And both of you have touched upon the subject we're now moving into, that is invention of new technologies, and we've been talking about the future, and this is indeed where we're looking at now, technology and innovation. I'll now call upon our next two witnesses, if you like, Bo Serup Simonsen and Ian Phillips. And let me just find your long and immaculate CVs. So I'll just briefly introduce you. You did indeed mention your name before, Ian, and I'm sure you're known to a lot of people. Ian Phillips was appointed Chief Executive of the Oil and Gas Innovation Centre in August 2014. And Bo, to Ian's left, Bo Serup Simonsen, is CEO of the, what's it called? Sorry.
DHRTC.
Right, I just wanted you to say that. Thank you very much. And you've had this position also for a long time, and you're both very much into the world, if you like, of innovation within the field of oil and gas. Now, before we get started, I'd like both of you perhaps to spend 2-3 minutes on to the audience, introducing your respective research centres. If you'll care to start, Bo, please.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting to this very nice day. I think it's been a fantastic first part of the day with the big picture, and to follow up on that, I'd say we are now down in the details. We're trying to solve a very concrete task. Great urgency, a lot of, you can say, real potentials, real data, real problems at hand. And therefore, we've had 2 years where we've been very busy, actually, and we've started pretty much from scratch. And we've built the center now to a level where we are beginning to get an understanding of what are the challenges we are going to address, what is the data we are going to work on, and how are we going to do it. And so during these first 2 years, we have actually worked on, first of all, together with DUC, carefully understanding what are the real barriers to increasing oil and gas recovery from the North Sea. And our task is to find new solutions that can increase recovery. And our approach to that is to first identify what are the barriers, where are the potentials, make it very concrete, and then turn towards academia and towards the world of suppliers, so basically towards the supply chain of solutions, and say, okay, here are the challenges. How do we crack these nuts? We have identified 6 such very concrete challenges, and we have turned around towards academia and been able to set up 6 programs that are, I would say, heavily composed of research projects. For each of these challenges, we now have big programs with altogether 67-ish people involved. So it's getting to materialize. And our next step is really to turn to the suppliers, the companies that are already delivering solutions to the industry, and invite them in a more open way into these discussions, and that will be going on from now on. So I think we've gotten a very good start, very, very nice collaboration with DUC, who has provided a lot of real data, and this is really the very critical starting point. So we're working on the real thing. We're opening this up to get real projects that can actually crack those nuts. Mm-hmm. I think in very short, that's where we are now.
Right, brilliant, Bo. And I should briefly say, I forgot to mention that before, that Bo's research centre is located at DTU, which is Danish Technological University. Sorry. Now, Ian, a few words about your centre, please.
Okay, so very much the same but very different. So my organisation is funded by the Scottish Government, and in particular it's funded through the Scottish Government's University Research Agency, which is called the Scottish Funding Council. So they've taken some of their research money and they are releasing it to the industry in a very different way. So my organisation is set up to respond to companies' demands to develop technologies. I should emphasize that most of my client companies, very different from Bo, most of my client companies are supply chain companies. They approach us and with an idea, a concept, something where they think university land somehow can help them. So we provide a 2-part service. We find that university capability, and we've got a fairly elegant system for finding university academics who, if I can say, are a little user-friendly and are prepared to come and work with commercial companies, and we provide grant funding to help make the project happen. So a typical project for us will involve 50% of the money coming from my organisation and 50% from the company. But the company is investing its own money, so it gets to keep the intellectual property, and we have a very, I would say, near or high speed to market track record. So our fastest to market was a company with a problem, and 15 months later the product was in the market.
Mm-hmm. Sounds reassuring. Speaking of that, I'd like to ask both of you, do you find that the companies in the oil and gas industry, are good enough, if you like, at embracing the alternative? Are you laughing?
The answer is no.
I didn't even get to ask my entire question. You're a mind reader. Anyway, I'll just repeat for the sake of the audience. The question being, if they're good enough at embracing the alternative methods, if you like, that your respective institutes are dealing with. Bo.
I'd say a lot of fantastic work has been done up to this point, and we've seen a lot of great solutions being developed and implemented. So that also makes the task a little bit challenging, because we're not starting sort of at ground zero. We're starting at a pretty high threshold to actually contribute. That's my understanding. To your question, I think the way we look at it is that if we are to bring something new to the table in a world where so much has been done already by competent companies, then we need to do it in a different way. And I think these are two different ways of doing it. And the way we try to do it is that we basically get a renewed look at the so-called challenges out there, the barriers to get more out. And then we try to open that up actually to academia and to the vendors to work on these challenges in a new way. And I mean, what we have seen so far is actually very positive and very competent engagement from both academia and companies in trying to get a renewed look at these challenges. And to that, you can also say that it's important to note that the challenges, many of the challenges have actually been known for long. I mean, scale and corrosion and the residual oil saturation and all that. I mean, the challenges and barriers have actually been known for long. But the thing is that science is moving very rapidly ahead, and this every day opens up new opportunities. And then the question is, how do you match these two worlds so that these new scientific technological opportunities actually come alive? And
exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So that's and I think with the portfolio we have right now, there's still a long way to go, but I think it looks promising, for sure.
Ian, you bluntly said no, even before I got to complete my question. And one would usually say where there is a threat, and I'm sure all of you have identified the threat, that's why we're talking about disruption, where there is a threat, there is usually also an opportunity. And are you saying that the industry as such has not yet faced up to, understanding the opportunities in new technology and alternative technology?
No, so I think the opportunities are well understood and well articulated, and people like Bo, commercial organizations, can articulate the potential benefits of technology very, very well. I think the problem is in getting the technologies deployed, and I think it's largely a commercial challenge. So I have a long list of companies who we work with, and they've got the capability, they've got a solution to a client oil company's problem, but they can't persuade the client oil company to be first to try it. I would say our industry collectively is good at being very keen to be third, and finding somebody to be the first or even the second deployment of particularly a significant technology is a huge challenge. And the reality is that there are good reasons for that. If you've got particularly a well-related technology, there might be, let us say, a $250,000 job to be done to deploy a piece of equipment down a hole. If you're the oil company and that technology fails, you might have 4 months of that well not producing oil. That could be $50 million of lost revenue. So your perception of the risk is like this. And as a result, it's quite a challenge to get technologies deployed for the first time to be de-risked. And that's why I said no.
I just remind you that anyone in the audience can chip in with critical comments or questions, so I'm just looking here and there. I just wonder if both of you could perhaps, in order not to make it, sound too abstract, if you could give some examples of projects, whether they be small or big, that your respective institutes are supporting.
Absolutely, yeah. So we have 6, like I mentioned right now, and we have 1 or 2 more coming up soon. And just to mention, well, very briefly, the 6 ones is very concrete and even for me easy to understand what we're trying to achieve. So the first one is, for example, Halfdan. So under Halfdan, you have deep down in the column a lot of oil and gas which will not be produced. So question is, can we use existing well infrastructure to reach further down below what is already being produced? That's a very concrete problem. So could you, for example, introduce a new kind of radial drilling that will go out from existing wells and produce from those lower levels? Another one is well integrity. So it's old infrastructure and there are well integrity trouble out there. So can you deploy new sensor technologies, new analytics, and after that new materials to repair and fix and optimize the well system out there? That's another one. Third one is the production facilities. I mean, they were designed and put in use more than 10 years ago. So sensor technologies and analytics have developed a lot since then. And question is, could we put new sensors to it and do analytics in a new way to optimize, in our case, the water injection system on the Dan and Halfdan complex? And I can mention a last one. So this is 4 out of 6. And that is the technical lifetime of these structures is pretty much at the design life. While they have been well maintained and the safety level is what it should be, they can easily live longer. But the question is, how do you do that? Taking advantage of new sensor technologies and new analytics. So these are very concrete technical challenges, and there is sort of a million-barrel price tag on or value tag on each of them if we can crack them. So. And we are looking very much forward to open that up. We have a technology conference in November, for example, where we'd like to explain this to the world around us. What is it actually we're trying to achieve, and invite companies and researchers and so on in to help us crack these nuts.
Right. I should briefly say that it's not because of lack of concentration, but now and again I have to look around. So don't get me wrong when I'm sitting like this. Ian, again, the same question, small projects, big projects, and perhaps if you could also comment on projects that your research centre wouldn't support.
Okay, so a big difference between the two of us is the scale of the funding. So Bo has probably an order of magnitude more funding, and a lot of the projects that he's just described are what I would characterize as the problem as described by an oil company. So they tend to be kind of big problems. We own the reservoir, half the oil's not being tapped, how do we get at it? Almost all of the projects that I do are very much smaller. So my absolute smallest project is a $30,000 project. It was almost not worth the administrative overhead to develop it. However, the potential was enormous because the concept was a replacement for a simple threaded drill pipe connection with the potential to take 75% out of the time of simply screwing or attaching 2 pieces of drill pipe together. Now, if that works, there are about 10,000 drill pipe connections on every well we drill all around the world. So enormous potential impact. So we supported it. Project's still in progress. Don't know if it's going to deliver. At the other extreme, our biggest project is a phase 2, and it's running to about $450,000 of value. And it's about a completely new insulation material for subsea pipelines. It will actually cost the same as the current insulation material to make, but it makes it much less of a health hazard to the workers who are actually manufacturing the pipe. So huge potential application. And perhaps if I make a general statement, most of the projects that we are funding, in fact all of them, have either a very clear health and safety implication, or they have a clear opportunity to save the oil company customer of the companies that we're working with money. And so that focus on cost reduction, I think, is a very common theme.
But do you have a red line that shouldn't be crossed in terms of which projects you will not support or deal with?
A red line, yes, you can say that. But on the other hand, we want to work. I mean, there is a line saying that we work we are placed in academia, and we certainly do work in academia, but there's a big gray zone from research and up to application. And it's very important that this doesn't become a death valley. This is also what Ian said before, that we actually fill this with life and make sure that we follow the ideas all the way up to application. So we have started in the lower end, if you will, at the maturity level of services. We have started we talk about technology readiness level, and we are working with fairly low levels of technology readiness. And that is for sure our, at the moment, primary engagement area. But as these ideas start to mature, then companies will want to step in and take ownership, co-invest, and bring these ideas up to actual full-scale testing and application. So you can say we divert the resources where the impact potential is high. We don't deliberately stop activities when we reach maturity level at some point, but we want to sort of hand it over to companies, or maybe the operator itself, to take these services along. So it's really, I think it's extremely important to understand the whole journey from early phase and up through these different gates, and particularly what was mentioned before, going from lab to full scale. That's like a very hard gate to pass. So once we do the investments in early phase research, we want to understand the criteria to pass that gate. So that is about technical safety. It's about understanding the operations. It's about understanding basically the economic criteria that you need to pass. Because if you don't understand those criteria, it's very unlikely that you're ever going to pass that gate.
Ian?
So Bo referred to a concept of a technology readiness level. The UK government and I think the EU use a 9-point scale that NASA invented many years ago. The low levels, 1, 2, 3 is, I've had the idea, maybe I've done a bit of lab work to show it. At the high level, number 9 is you can go buy it off the shelf. The bit in the middle is this valley of death. And a lot of technologies fail at that point where you've got the concept, you know it works, but translating that into a purchasable product or service is a huge challenge. Now, in contrast to Bo, who's concentrated perhaps at the low end, 1 to 4, my focus is generally in the sort of 5 to 7 or 8 range. So it's about getting technologies to the point of application. Now, you asked the question, are there some no-go areas? I'm not sure that there are at the moment. So long we have, because I'm giving away public money, I have an external project review panel that independently checks that the projects are innovative and relevant to oil and gas. So long as it passes that, we can do pretty much anything. So although most of my projects are mechanical engineering, chemistry, material science, we have a psychology project, and we even have a human factors project where we're looking at the application of a health and safety system with different national and religious groups, because sometimes the things that we take for granted in the North Sea about health and safety systems flat don't work, because that particular cultural group says, well, actually, I can't say to my superior that they're doing something dangerous. So we're actually looking at human factors to improve health and safety in that manner. So not many limits that I've found yet.
Do you want to add something, Bo?
Yeah, I'd like to add that instead of talking about the no-go zones, I'd also rather talk about the new opportunities which have arisen here. And I think the new opportunity for us, at least, is that we get access to real data, to expertise with an operator, and a willingness, actually, we hope, that's the intent, at least, to test out new solutions. So if you match that new opportunity with this access to data and the willingness to share this data, if we're smart in matching this up with academia and with companies, then I think there are great new opportunities arising. And what so many talk about with radical innovation and the idea of open innovation and radical innovation and the in the collaboration between authority, operator, or industry and academia, I think this is exactly what we're trying to achieve here. And the resources we've been given to do it this time, I think, are quite unique. So I think there's a chance to actually do it.
And I wonder if you could perhaps, to round this off, what do you see as the next big thing in terms of oil and gas technology I mean, is there one thing that sort of crystallizes itself and you can now, in the field of academia, say, look, in 10, 15 years' time, this is it?
Okay, I can start. I would like to say that we have deliberately chosen not to pick a winner early in the early days, and this is very important actually, because as we have started this journey, new opportunities show up, and it's only really when you go into this work that you figure out where is it that in our case science can make a difference to these challenges. It's impossible to decide that up front, but there are some obvious ones which everybody's talking about and that we also see, like digitalization, automation, it was mentioned already, visualization, the new opportunities arising with computer power going sky high. I mean, there are definitely some opportunities now that were not here 10 years ago. So those are obvious ones. But I think really it's actually, I mean, I wouldn't want to exclude any sciences or any disciplines. We'd really like to keep the doors open, be open about the problems we're trying to solve. Actually, if somebody comes from biochemistry or from, yeah, you name it, they should have a chance to actually look into these problems and see if they can help solve it. That's how we're working at the moment. And we just launched what we call a sprint activity, where we opened the challenges to academia. And we got 100 ideas from corners of academia that we hadn't even dreamt of. So I think this is also important to keep in mind, that there's probably something out there.
But you didn't tell us what it was. You just gave us ideas that things that...
Oh, it could... I mean, biochemistry or biotechnology could definitely be one of them.
Ian?
So I actually have pretty much the same too. So I think everything digital offers enormous potential, and I think generally speaking, the oil industry has been slow to pick up. If you look at what's happened in many other industrial sectors, and it's quite a broad area because it's sensing technology, so it's collecting information, it's data analytics to look for trends in data, it's visualization, it's machine learning, a whole range of different things under that umbrella of digital. I would argue that one of the challenges you have here in Denmark, we have it in the UK, is we have a lot of old facilities. They were built before anybody even invented the internet. So they are undersensed compared to modern facilities. So I think digital is one big opportunity, and I'd also agree with Bo. I think the opportunities that biotechnology offers are mind-boggling. I am working, I'm one of 8 innovation centres in Scotland. Another one looks at industrial biotechnology, and we are about to issue a joint call. And we are looking at totally weird things, like a live biofilm that acts as a paint on the inside of your wellbore to prevent corrosion. And what it's doing is eating some of the stuff that's passing by in the wellbore, and it's staying alive. I mean, that is, my head's already spinning with the whole idea. But the scientists who do biotechnology say, don't see why we can't do that. Other ones are about enhanced oil recovery, to put bioactive agents into, for instance, your injection water, so that it makes the water more viscous, and it doesn't need a daily supply of food because it's eating what it finds in the reservoir. And this is weird stuff. And from our industry's point of view, and the UK figure is we average 35% recovery from the fields we find. So the old adage that says the best place to look for more oil is where you've already found it is very, very true in this example.
Right. I guess there are several more questions to be asked. I don't know if anyone in the audience has one. There's one there, because we have a few more minutes before we move on to the next session.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Edward from the University of Copenhagen. I have a question for Ian. So you talked about the fact that sometimes there is frustration in the sense that you have solutions and industry is quite slow to pick up on that. So would you say that this unwillingness, because of maybe financial constraints, is this unwillingness to implement new innovation, would you say it is harming progress in having this potentially more effective technology to come on board in the oil industry? And having that in mind, would you say that the oil industry could potentially be responsible or be holding itself back because of this unwillingness, because of the financial cost? And number two, How do you reassure? How do you reassure those companies who, I imagine, come to you for help in the first place? How do you reassure them that the technology that you have come up with is worth actually carrying out, testing out, having the in the background the financial cost it might have, and this implementation? How do you have it? How do you push? How much pull do you have? Like, how much influence do you actually have towards convincing the companies, the industry, to actually implement what you come up with as solutions? Thank you.
It's a great question.
A lot of questions. So I think the first thing to say is the oil industry is not lacking in innovation. There are a lot of technologies that do roll out, but I would say it rolls out slowly. So a thing I've used in a number of presentations is the take-up of horizontal wells was depressingly slow. The first horizontal wells were drilled by ELF in the south of France in the early 1980s. When I was working for Halliburton in the late 1990s, I went into one oil company who said, we're thinking of trying this new technology. And I'm a reservoir engineer by background, and I'm thinking which bit of 100 times more contact with the reservoir doesn't make any sense, and why is it so slow? So I think there is, the industry does innovate, and it does develop new things. However, I would argue that it is slow, and it's a challenge for every technology company, whether it's large or small. There are efforts being made in a number of places to try and make test facilities available. So for instance, some of the big global oil companies that have land operations are able to do technology trials at a much lower cost than we can do offshore in the North Sea. So that's attractive, because if it works on a low-cost land operation in the south of Texas or in the middle of Borneo or in the middle of Saudi Arabia, it'll probably work in the North Sea, and you've got that evidence without the cost. So I think that it's wrong to say that we don't innovate, but there are definitely some commercial issues. About the certainty of uptake, so one of the things my company or my organization does, we don't have technology of our own. We help companies to develop technology. So our test of does the company believe it can commercialize the technology is simple. If they're willing to put the other half of the money into the project, we're willing to back it. So in a sense, I duck the issue by making sure it's the commercial company that's wanting to develop the technology that's willing to put its own money on the table.
Thanks, Ian. We have time for one more question. The gentleman there.
Hi, John Sørensen from Rambøll. A question for Bo in particular, but maybe you can add on from a UK perspective on this. A couple of years ago, DUC spent quite a lot of money and effort into investigating the possibility of CO2 injection, and they actually do that in Texas. And then that project was kind of shelved due to deliverables of CO2, to my knowledge anyhow. Is that something that's kind of been revisited because in a new environment and different cost perspective, and with time passing on, there might be a new possibility, because that could definitely increase production, potentially. So maybe you can elaborate a bit on that.
Absolutely, thank you for the question. So right now, we're not pursuing CO2 injection. I think the technical potential has been proven, and it's been shown to be more of a sort of a supply chain challenge than actually a technical additional recovery trend. So in other words, you need the CO2 at the right price in order for this to materialize. So we are not pursuing this at the moment. I would say though that we could very easily pick it up again if opportunities arise. So we've set up this whole idea about building demonstration models, and we're right now building models for certain parts of the North Sea, and we are looking at enhanced recovery. So we're building lab facilities and reservoir models that can prove if you change the chemistry or the flow in the reservoir, what will happen. So we could very easily do it, but we are not doing it at the moment.
If I could add a confession, in my previous role, I was for 7 years with a company that was trying to be the owner and operator of carbon capture stores. So I got very much into the carbon dioxide. Your point about the supply is absolutely the issue. The entire European market for CO2 right now is about 1 million tons a year. For a typical decent-sized oil field, you need a couple of million tons a year of CO2 supply for one field. And the other thing is you only need it for 4 or 5 years, because after that you cycle the CO2. So you need a program of fields to make it economic, and that's where it starts to become commercially and politically challenging. So it'll work.
This will be the last word, sorry, because we have to move on. Thank you very much, Bo and Ian.
Okay.